Stigma in Education, A Teacher's Guide by Cortland James Woods. Introduction. Students with disabilities have made significant gains in education access and equality over the last century. However, there are still barriers which impede educational equality for students with disabilities to the present day. One of these barriers is stigma related to disabilities. Teachers can help address stigma toward their students by employing evidence-based practices. By addressing stigma, teachers can make education more inclusive. Background. Before 1959, there was no federal law requiring education for children with disabilities. BDV Board of Education supported school districts' decision to restrict children with disabilities from their schools. Several court cases and laws from the 1950s to 1970s started to establish a right to education. Brown v. Board of Education inspired Park v. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and Mills v. Board of Education, D.C. Public Law 86-158, 88-164, and 89-010 all dealt with teacher training for students with disabilities and early education. The Education for All Handicapped Children Act helped to codify the right to education. This was later reauthorized as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and it helped to enshrine a free and appropriate public education, FAPE, the Least Restrictive Environment, LRE, and Individualized Education Plan, IEP, which all form the foundation of special education. Nonetheless, there are still barriers to education equality. There are financial barriers, like federal funding. Per IDEA, the federal government is to fund 40% of the costs for special education, that is the average per pupil expenditure. It has never met this funding level and has exceeded half the level, 20%, only once in 2009. Lack of funding leads to inadequate training, lack of materials, and missing services. Attitudes are also a barrier, such as stigma. Stigma is negative attitudes towards people that lead to discrimination and mistreatment. Ableism is based on the social stigma attached to people with disabilities. Ableism leads to bullying, low expectations, and low self-esteem. What exactly is stigma? Kolek discusses several types of stigma. There's experience stigma, experiences of stigma, such as negative attitudes, discrimination, prejudice towards students. Perceived stigma, a student's belief of stigma toward them, and affiliate or self-stigma, a student applying the stigma to themselves. All types of stigma have an impact. Stigma experienced by students with disabilities is associated with social exclusion, lowered self-efficacy, victimization, worse test scores and grades, and higher absenteeism. Stigma held by peers and adults is associated with bullying, lowered expectations, and less pedagogical support. Here are some direct examples. Stigma can leave an indelible mark on students. Research on college students found that 1 in 4 students with disabilities do not seek assistance, such as special tutoring, accommodations, etc., for fear of stigmatization. This leads to a vicious cycle where students fall further and further behind. Research on high school students demonstrated that students with disabilities face stereotype threat, such as performing worse on assessments when non-disabled peers were involved. Stigma has a true and deep impact on students. So why is it important to address stigma? Stigma and its associated ableism set up barriers for students with disabilities. Because of these barriers, many students with disabilities internalize stigma, which has negative impact on their educational achievement. Education equality will not be achieved without addressing the stigma and ableism entrenched in education. It is vitally important, then, to establish practices that can address stigma. Some evidence-based practices to address stigma. There's teacher training. Teachers may harbor bias against students with disabilities or feel that they are unable to support them appropriately. This can lead to lower expectations and less support being allotted to the student. Research has demonstrated that teacher training on disabilities can help reduce bias. Training on how to support students with disabilities is also beneficial as it builds the capacity and confidence of teachers. There's also disability awareness training. Students and staff that have a bias against students with disabilities can lead to social ostracizing, bullying, and mistreatment. Part of this bias may be rooted in ignorance and unfamiliarity with disabilities. Research has indicated that conducting disability awareness training for students and staff has helped to improve views of students with disabilities and lessen bias. There's also peer-mediated intervention. Peers can be a strong influence and support for students with disabilities. When trained properly, peers can learn and then deliver interventions to help students with disabilities, which is peer-mediated intervention, PMI. Research has demonstrated that PMI training improves the peers' perceptions of people with disabilities. PMI also helps the students with disabilities to increase their social interaction and academic engagement. PMI can be arranged in the classroom, as part of a buddy program, or as sports coaching. Using these evidence-based practices to address stigma can lessen bias, improve perceptions, increase expectations, increase appropriate support, and empower students with disabilities. This can help make education more inclusive.
Okay, now we're going to do some counting. Girls, in twos.
I don't understand why I'm at the back of the class. I wish I was like everyone else. I want to do what they are doing. But here I am, doing the same old number activity, watching as my classmates learn something else. Don't they know that they're setting me up to fail? Don't they know they hold my future in their hands? I want to work with my class, learn what they are learning, and do the activities they do. But here I am, stuck at the back, limited by low expectations. Having a one-on-one teacher aide just teaches me to rely on them and means I get less attention from the teacher. I'm not included in the classroom. I am in the same room but segregated from my peers, sat to the side or back, working on different things and missing out. I want to be free to learn with my peers, reach my full potential and be seen to be like everyone else. I need something to change.
This video powerfully demonstrates how stigma can impact students in the classroom. Lowered expectations, less pedagogical support, all lead to less inclusive education settings. Call to action. What can we do? Future research. Several evidence-based practices to address stigma were identified in this presentation. However, additional research into this area would be beneficial, especially intersectional and longitudinal studies. School-based studies often lack representative samples, limiting their applicability. Most studies are only cross-sectional in nature, so the efficacy of interventions over time is unknown. If future research could help address these areas, then stigma could be more powerfully dealt with. There's also funding. Teacher training and other interventions would be more easily implemented if funding was at the appropriate level. We can urge Congress to uphold the government's promise on special education funding. In conclusion, educational access for students with disabilities has increased with the passage of laws and rulings of court cases. Despite the guarantees of the law, students are still denied full access and equality through social and systemic barriers. To ensure education equality, stigma must be addressed, and it can be addressed through evidence-based practices. With more research and funding, we would be aided in these efforts. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. I hope you have learned something.